Hey everyone, today I'll be discussing and giving my explanations to the Genshin Impact Iceberg post iterated by user evolongvalid. Along with their topics, I'll be including some of my own, since the original image was post iterated way back in February 2021. Before we begin, it's important to mention that, given the game's continuous work in progress, a lot of what I say might just be outdated or false in an unspecified amount of time. Also, a lot of these topics are theories with little to no confirmation, therefore theories will be marked accordingly in the bottom left corner. Without further ado, let's begin. Slimes are one of the most common enemies found throughout Teyvat, and by themselves they don't pose much of a threat. Due to their near harmless nature, humans and other beings have turned to finding other uses in slimes. For example, slimes have been shown by characters like Zhongli to be edible, large animal slimes can operate air balloons, pyro or cryo slimes can be used as explosives, and electro slimes can be used as power sources. More than 4,000 years ago, 7 divine seats in Celestia were opened, leading to the gods becoming increasingly thirsty for supremacy amongst themselves. The conflicts between various gods across the lands caused by their own desire to rule over the nations is what is referred to as the Archon War. It's important to mention that the Archon War was not limited to one god per region. For example, in Liyue, the Archon War was between many gods, including Morax, Guzhong, khaenri'ah, Ozil, and more. In Mondstadt, however, the only known conflict during the Archon War was between Andrias and the Caribbean. When looking up to the sky in a certain direction while playing, the player can spot a floating island, which is none other than Celestia, the residence of the gods. The position of Celestia does not change from day to night, but it changes roughly based on the location of the player. The Abyss is a mysterious location situated both beneath and beyond Teyvat, currently inaccessible to the player. Home to the Abyss Order, it is also referred to as a land of eternal darkness and is often described as holding an unworldly power. Visions are gifts bestowed by the gods upon those who take residence in Teyvat and are responsible for granting elemental abilities based on one of the 7 elements that visions can come in, save for possible exceptions like Mona or Albedo. A vision takes the form of a glowing gem featuring the icon of the element and is decorated according to the region which the character wielding it originates from. They are carried in person, cannot, to current knowledge, be destroyed, and will deactivate after the wielder dies, losing its color and abilities. Genshin Impact bases its 7 nations out of real-world countries and locations. The nations we can currently access, Mondstadt, Liyue, and Inazuma, are based off of Germany, China, and Japan respectively, while the unreleased regions of Sumeru, Fontaine, Northland, and Snezhnaya are expected to be based off of the Middle East, France, Africa, and Russia respectively, although none of these are confirmed. An isekai is a subgenre of fantasy in which a character is suddenly transported from their world into a new or unfamiliar one, which is pretty much what happens with the traveler in Genshin Impact. Khaenri'ah was a technologically advanced land ruled by no god, not because the citizens were abandoned, but because there was never any god in Khaenri'ah to begin with. It is not part of Teyvat, nor is it under purview of the 7. We can see khaenri'ah, or part of it, in one of the teaser trailers for Genshin Impact, as it is a location where the traveler first awoke. Kaeya, one of the main playable characters from Genshin Impact, is associated to Mondstadt in-game, but in reality hails from khaenri'ah, having the same star-shaped eye as Dainslave, another denizen from khaenri'ah. He was abandoned at a very young age in Dawn Winery with the purpose of being the struggling nation's last hope, being taken care of by Crepus, Diluc's father. However, the ultimate reason behind Kaeya being placed as a sleeper in Mondstadt by forces from khaenri'ah and needing to infiltrate the Ragnvindr family is still unknown. The Ragnvindr family and the Gunhildr family are two of the most prominent clans or families in current-day Mondstadt. Both were created during Decorabian's rule of Old Mondstadt and have their names derived from Ragnvindr and Gunhildr respectively, two prominent figures from long ago. Some of the family's known descendants are Krepus and Diluc Ragnvindr, Frederica and Jean Gunhildr, and Barbara Peg, who was born into the family but left with her father's name, Seamus Peg. Also, at some point in time, either Ragnvindr himself or someone after him with his namesake created Dawn Winery, which is currently owned by Diluc. Decorabian, also known as the God of Storms, the Lord of the Tower, and one of the kings of Ice and Frost, was a god who lived over 2,600 years ago and founded the nation of Mondstadt. His previous place of reign, currently what's known as Stormterror's Lair, was a methodically organized city, created with himself at the center. He thought of his reign to be a good one, his people, however, did not. Decorabian had enclosed his city inside a windy prison after his conflict with Andreas during the Archon War, which fed into the desire of his people to see the world beyond. They saw him as a tyrant, and eventually rebelled in the name of freedom. He was killed by the hands of his own people, leading to the nameless wind spirit allied with the rebels, ascending to godhood and becoming Barbados, the animal archon of the Seven. Old Mondstadt refers to the city of Mondstadt ruled by Decorabian over 2,600 years ago, as I just mentioned. Barbados, after becoming the animal archon, moved his people and constructed current-day Mondstadt on Cider Lake. During the Cataclysm 500 years ago, the Valing took residence in Decorabian's tower to recover from the injuries incurred during his battle against another dragon known as Durin. In subsequent years, after the people of Mondstadt forgot about the Valing, the area of Old Mondstadt became what's known as Stormterror's Lair. The Irminsul is a type of silver-white tree whose roots stretch down into the abyss and who are connected to the ley lines of the world. Above the ground, it can be identified as the petrified trees found in the mains, leyline outcrops, and leyline blossoms in Teyvat. The frost-bearing tree in Dragonspine, for example, is an Irminsul tree. Gold was an alchemist who lived over 500 years ago, and one of the direct causations of the previously mentioned cataclysm that affected khaenri'ah and spawned monsters in the world of Teyvat. Gold was corrupted by their own greed and ambition and created an army of shadowy monsters with their uncanny powers, ranging from the ones we see roaming the lands of Teyvat to unimaginably large and fierce creatures. Now, I haven't played Honkai Impact that much, I've only made it past the first 2 stages, but some parallels can be drawn between this game and Genshin Impact. To avoid talking about something that I can't be entirely sure if it's plausible, I can only be sure of that if I actually play the game, I'll leave a link in the description to a video explaining the major connections between both IPs. Although they haven't been explicitly called cat people or elf people, characters with similar traits do exist in Genshin Impact. For example, Diona and Draph are descendants of the Cat's-line bloodline, giving them cat-like features. While Klee and Alice both share elf-like ears and are from a race blessed with longevity, like elves. The name Guili is derived from the first character in Guizhong's name and the second character in Morax's name at the time when they both ruled over the Guili Plains. The Guili Plains were once a beautiful place, being also called the Plains of Returning and Departing, based on the characters taken from its name. Unfortunately, during the Archon War, Guizhong died trying to defend her people, and the place was destroyed. After her death, Rex Lapis took his people and brought them to south of Mount Tianheng. Is that right? Hold on. Tianheng? I think it's right. Where he established Liyue Harbor. Alice is a character who is still to make a proper appearance in the game, and by proper I mean physically, although she's been mentioned several times during story quests. She's the author of the Teyvat Travel Guide and the mother of Klee, and notably has a bit of a crazy side to her. Some of her actions have been noted to completely disregard human safety measures, such as creating a giant wind current by blasting an animal's line extremely far up and performing wind glider tricks on said current, teaching Klee how to craft explosive plushies after watching Amber's Baron Bunny, trying to create a launching device so humans could reach Celestia using hilichurls as test subjects, of course that failed, blowing up several archways in Storm Terror's lair to make them more easily accessible and ancient looking, coming up with an idea of perpetual motion machines using, again, hilichurls, by forcing them to run in huge ball-shaped cells to create energy for Mondstadt's windmills, trying to control a rune guard, yet again using a hilichurl as a subject, and deciding to spare the reader from the gory details while destroying half of the ancient ruins in Bright Crown Canyon in the process, and possibly more. Vanessa was a hero of Mondstadt who lived over 1,000 years ago during the era when the aristocracy reigned. Originally a Muratan from Natlan, she was cruelly enslaved by the tyrannical nobles and served as a gladiator in the Colosseum. She became known as the Lionfang Knight due to her undefeated streak. After befriending Barbados, who noticed the situation regarding the aristocracy in Mondstadt, he and Vanessa, with the help of other prominent figures during the time, took down the aristocracy and freed the enslaved Muratans. She then reconstructed the current city of Mondstadt and established the Knights of Favonius, becoming its first Dandelion Knight. At the end of her life, Vanessa ascended to Celestia at Windrise, a feat which only one other person is known to have achieved, that being Guhua, leaving behind her the large tree found there. Afterwards, she became the Falcon of the West, one of the Four Winds, due to the shape she took while ascending to Celestia. The Fatui are a legion of diplomats who hail from Snezhnaya, with a military detachment led by the 11 Fatui Harbingers, featuring some known names like Tartaglia and Scaramouche, and the Tsaritsa herself. The Fatui are one of the main antagonists throughout both the game and the manga, and the Zapoliarny Palace is merely the place in Snezhnaya where the Tsaritsa reigns. The Nameless Bard was a boy who lived in Old Mondstadt. He befriended a wind spirit that eventually turned into Barbados, and with it, participated in the conflict that dethroned the Caribbean. However, the Nameless Bard was never able to see the world beyond, as he was mortally injured and died during the Caribbean's fall. When he first ascended, Barbados' first use of power was to create a vessel, who we now know as Venti, in the Nameless Bard's image to pay homage to him and live in the world he never had the chance to see. Amos was also an inhabitant of Old Mondstadt. She was genuinely in love with the ruler of the Caribbean before turning on him after he continuously ignored her and the people's pleas to see the outside world. As such, Amos, along with other figures such as the Wind Spirit who eventually became Barbados, a red-haired warrior possibly related to Ragnvindr, a nameless knight, possibly Gunhilder, and the Nameless Bard led and fought with the population in order to dethrone the Caribbean, a conflict during which she presumably lost her life. She was the wielder and the namesake of Amos's bow, which Venti uses probably in memory of her. While the Cryo-Archon's current ideals and title as an Archon are not known, during the preview for the 6th Archon quest in the Teyvat chapter storyline preview, Tinsley talks about how
she is a god with no love left for her people, nor do they have any left for her.
Additionally, according to Tartaglia, the Tsaritsa is in reality a gentle soul, too gentle in fact, and that's why she had to harden herself. Possibly meaning that she is either the former Archon of Love under a different title, or still the Archon of Love with drastically different ideals. In-game, khaenri'ah was destroyed 500 years ago in an event known as the Cataclysm, previously mentioned when talking about gold. Ultimately, it was destroyed by the gods, leading to the constant suffering of the citizens, which includes the Abyss Order. The destruction of khaenri'ah by the gods is the main motive behind the Abyss Order's desire to destroy any land associated with the gods. Chapter ? Refers to the chapter in the game's story that takes place in khaenri'ah. In the wiki, it is shown as Chapter 7, as it chronologically takes place after the 6th chapter in Snezhnaya, but in the Teyvat chapter storyline preview, the text appears fuzzy and unreadable. The unreleased region of Sumeru is recalled by many as the center of learning. There exists the Sumeru Academia, the most prestigious institute in all of Teyvat. Obtaining a degree from the academia is described as an extremely long, notorious, and stressful process. An unnamed prospective who had been admitted states that he will be old by the time he graduates and sees his parents again. However, Lisa attended the academia in her youth and managed to graduate within 2 years of advanced studying and is considered to be their top student in 200 years. In order to understand Xiao's PTSD, we need to understand first what the Yaxes were. To quell the lingering hatred of fallen gods from the Archon War, which caused plagues, curses, and miasmas all over Liyue, Morax called upon the Yaxes, fierce illuminated beasts, to help wage a never-ending war against the monsters and other such manifestations of the gods' hatred. However, this ended up staining them with karmic debt, which wore away their souls and their sanity. Some Yaxes turned on each other, some got consumed by the darkness, and others vanished. Nowadays, although not all Yaxes have been forgotten, only Aladus remains alive, going by the name Xiao, bearing the pain and trauma when being reminded of his dark past. The Hexen Circle is an organization of witches that conducts immortal explorations and gathers around for formal tea parties, whatever that means.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Dude! Fuck!
Not all witches, however, are affiliated with this circle. Lisa and the Crimson Witch of Flames, for example, either haven't been shown to be part of the Hexen Circle or have explicitly denied participation in the group. Two of the known members of the Hexen Circle are Mona and Alice, while Mona's master is speculated to be part of the group. So this may come as a surprise to some and a disappointment for others, but Kaya does in fact not have a ponytail. Instead, he has this gross grown out patch of hair which is not even centered, and I end up hating it more and more the more I look at it.
Look at this dude.
Just please go see a barber. A popular theory that's been floating around since the game's launch regards the uncanny similarities between Paimon, your companion throughout the game, and the unknown goddess, seen during the first cutscene of the game. Some say Paimon is the weakened version of the unknown goddess. Both have white hair, and Paimon adorns a hair clip similar to the star shapes seen during the unknown god's cutscene. Paimon also talks about wanting power and rare weapons whenever given the chance. The theory goes something like this, and I'm sorry if I get something wrong. The unknown goddess was weakened during the fight with his siblings, so she regressed to a weaker form in order to recover her lost energy. Later on, likely during the final chapters, Paimon will turn on the player and reveal that they had been tricked during the entire quest through Teyvat. While extremely debatable, this theory is also very interesting and poses us another question regarding Paimon's and the unknown goddess's true identities. Delusions are incredibly powerful treasures originating from the Fatui. Few outside of the ranks have one in their possession, as the Teresa grants worthy members of the Fatui, such as Child and Senora, a delusion in person. They are said to be infinitely more powerful than visions, making them look like child's play in comparison. As shown in the manga, Diluc's father Crepus was in possession of a delusion which he planned to give to his son on his 18th birthday. However, after being attacked by Ursa the Drake, Crepus wielded his delusion to save his son. The extreme power from the delusion ended up backfiring on him, however, leaving Crepus mortally wounded. Diluc ended up taking the vision for himself, which never backfired on him, probably due to him being a vision holder, while Crepus was not. His illusion takes the form of a vision-like apparatus fitted onto his glove. Diluc, after being arrested by the Fatui guards in a plot to absolve the Knights of Favonius from any responsibility regarding the Blackfire incident, breaks out of prison and leaves his illusion behind. This is the name given to the tribe of inhabitants hailing from Northland, who were enslaved during the Mondstadt aristocratic period. They are described as hardy people blessed with a head of fiery red hair, as seen in the manga, and have Vanessa as their leader. Honestly, I don't even know why this entry is here, or what it refers to. Leisha is an area in southwest Liyue that most interestingly serves as the entrance to the chasm, an area that hasn't even been released yet, so why is it here? The god of salt who lived during the Archon War. hahAA was described as a gentle but weak soul, refusing to partake in the conflict, hoping the past days of peace would return. These two qualities were the ultimate reason to her death, not by the hands of other gods, but by the hands of her own followers. As seen in the first act of Zhongli's story quest, her last piece of land and the place where she met her doom is a domain sealed hundreds of years ago, located in Salterai, Liyue. hahAA's moment of death at the hands of one of her followers brought not only the end to her own life, but to the lives of those around her, as her powers surged uncontrollably. Those who could not escape were turned into statues made of salt, and those who did were scattered across Liyue, some even becoming the Yunyuan Hall of the 8 trades, specializing in the salt industry. khaenri'ah is, or rather was, a mysterious figure from Liyue and namesake of the khaenri'ah clan. It is said that khaenri'ah was an adeptus who was sent to Celestia at the end of his journey, much like Vanessa, and became a star in the midst of a purple haze at Huaguang's Stone Forest. It is known that in the Abyss, time flows differently than in Teyvat. More specifically, time flows faster in the Abyss. For example, if you spend 1 month in the Abyss, not recommended, only 1 day would pass in Teyvat. Little is known about Mona's master, only that she is or was good friends with Alice and is known to have gifted Mona her vision as a teaching aid tool. Also, Mona, while respectful of her master, seems to want to avoid being in her presence in order to not incur her wrath, hence why she takes permanent residence in Mondstadt after her story quest, leading one to believe she might be a wandering astrologist. It is said that prolonged exposure to the Abyss can drastically change a person's personality or corrupt their entire being, and that those who have personal ties to the Abyss have been known to gain an uncanny ability to wreak havoc and conflict, which is the case with Tartaglia. He once ran away from home and accidentally wandered into the Abyss after falling in a deep hole when he was only 14 years old. During this time in the Abyss, he met a swordswoman, Skirk, whom he reveres with respect as his master. She trained him, taught him to navigate the Abyss, and nurtured his ability to raise endless conflict no matter where he went, as seen in the Liyue Archon quest. Tartaglia spent 3 months in the Abyss, but returned to discover he had only been missing for 3 days in Teyvat time. All current known and residing Archons in Genshin Impact, plus Paimon and another entity we will look at in due time, have their names entirely derived from demons in the Ars Goetia, a book from the Lesser Key of Solomon, a grimoire on demonology anonymously compiled during the 17th century. According to the Ars Goetia, Barbados is an Earl and Duke of Hell. He gives the understanding of the voices of the animals, says past and future, conciliates friends and rulers, and he can lead men to hidden treasures that have been hidden by the enchantment of magicians. Morax is a demon, Great Earl, and President of Hell with 30 legions of demons under his command. He teaches astronomy and all other liberal sciences, and gives good and wise familiars that know the virtue of all herbs and precious stones. And Paimon is one of the kings of Hell, with 200 legions of demons under his rule. Additionally, Xiao's name means demon in Chinese, according to the wiki. All of this, however, doesn't really mean much. From my point of view, miHoYo were just inspired by names from demonology, which, to be fair, sound pretty cool, and they don't really have anything to do with the Archons. It's known that, out of the 5 Yakshas, 3 died or disappeared, 1 survived, Xiao, and another one went missing. However, there's no concrete evidence pointing towards this missing Yaksha being a future playable character, other than maybe the fact that Xiao is a playable Yaksha and maybe, just maybe, the missing one will also be, but that's just 100% speculation. Half a year before the traveler arrived in Mondstadt, Varka, the current Grandmaster and Knight of Boreas of the Knights of Favonius, departed on an expedition with the city's elite forces, leaving Jean as the acting Grandmaster in his absence. The thing is, no one has heard from Varka ever since, and although he is said to be a tough man, he is visionless and not invincible, leading one to believe that perhaps Varka and his people perished in a foreign dangerous land. However, none of this is confirmed, and Varka could still come back to Mondstadt and even be featured in a future banner, who knows. There exists a popular theory created by Reddit user LEOO, in which they state that Paimon, our traveling companion, is in fact the 8th Archon mentioned in this entry. According to this theory, at one point there were 8 Archons instead of only 7, the 8th one being the god of time. However, this 8th Archon did not have any relations to the other Archons, nor did they have any relations to Celestia or Teyvat, as there are only 7 lands according to the 7 different elements. This theory stems from the fact that the Archon's noses resemble chess pieces, as pointed out by Ellie. However, you don't play chess with only 7 pawn pieces, you need a total of 8. The pawns in this case are the Archons who are employed by Celestia. I will leave a link to this and any other external theories in the description, so read at your own leisure and come up with your own conclusions. The location known as Mare Jivari is said to be a sea of ashes where the wind does not blow. It's a dangerous desert with a sea of scorching lava, located to the southwestern end of Teyvat, sometimes described as the edge of the world. An adventurer named Stanley once set foot in Mare Jivari and traversed the entire place only to perish while saving a certain adventurer often seen in Mondstadt. This adventurer, now going by the same name as Stanley, recounts the real Stanley's tales as though they were his own to keep the man's memory alive. Khaenri'ah is an advanced and volatile type of alchemy developed in khaenri'ah. This type of alchemy allows for the creation of life itself, but was eventually one of the main motives that led to the destruction of the nation. So far, the only people known to be practitioners of Khaenri'ah are Gold, Albedo, and his master and right daughter. Dainsleif, being a denizen of khaenri'ah and having witnessed his land be destroyed by the misuse of Khaenri'ah, is wary of his practitioners, stating that, were Albedo ever to make a wrong move and accidentally release the full power of Khaenri'ah into Mondstadt, he wouldn't let himself ignore it. Venti also recognizes Albedo's use of Khaenri'ah, calling it an ancient power with unmistakable properties, and also being fearful of what could happen if Albedo were to lose control of it inside the city. The chasm, the mining area previously mentioned, was created out of a fragment of a star that fell west of Dunir ruins. Before the events of the Cataclysm 500 years ago, jade would continuously emerge from within the chasm, sustaining the mining industry in Liyue and the Dunir area financially for thousands of years. Asmodee is the name of the unknown goddess we see at the beginning of the game. Her name was, from my knowledge, discovered directly from the code of Genshin Impact using Unity, as seen in this video. It is not mentioned anywhere else in the game. Also, this name ties back to the entry about the link between the Archon's names and demons, as Asmodee in the Ars Goetia is described as strong, powerful, and appears with 3 heads. The first is like a bull, the second is like a man, and the third like a ram, the tail of a serpent, and from his mouth issue flames of fire. Inside a hole in Wormrest Valley in Dragonspine lies a red, pulsating orb, almost looking like a heart. This heart, which is important for the quest that unlocks a weapon known as the Dragonspine Spear, is located inside the ribcage of a skeleton of what looks like a giant dragon, which is further supported by the name of the location. This is the heart of Durin, a giant dragon corrupted with the power of Khaenri'ah by Gold. It was defeated by Barbados and Dvalin, and is an entire reason as to why Dvalin is poisoned during the first quest of Genshin Impact. Durin is said to have been slain in a Skyborn battle, and when he was defeated, his remains fell from the sky and lit in the mountain. Before Albedo was released in 1.2, there were leaks indicating he was at one point meant to be a Geo-aligned bow user. This ended up not being the case in the final release, however, as Albedo uses a sword, and the Geo bow user will be the upcoming character from Inazuma, Goro. This entry refers to the multiple implications that all Catharines present in the adventurers guilds throughout the nations are some sort of robot, artificially created by someone. For example, if you stand long enough near her, she will say error and rebooting. All Catharines share the same voice actor and appearance, regardless of location. They will always greet you in the same way, and most interestingly, feature what could possibly be a keyhole on the back of their necks. However, no one knows if this is true or not. When researching, I couldn't find much on this, other than statements that Archons are not the same as gods, which debatable I think. If anyone could help me out on this, I would truly appreciate it. Some claim that khaenri'ah is likely to be the Prince of Khaenri'ah, or to be, at the very least, related to khaenri'ah's nobility, or someone very important and significant. Honestly, I read an entire theory on the subject and I wasn't able to formulate a proper sentence to put in here, so I need help. I can, however, certainly understand why someone would think this is, because khaenri'ah is way too much of a character khaenri'ah is way too much of a shady character, and you can basically formulate all sorts of theories around him and khaenri'ah, which I find really enticing. During the limited time Unreconciled Stars story quest from version 1.1, Scaramouche says this.
The stars, the sky, it's all a gigantic hoax. A lie.
Scaramouche himself refused to elaborate much on what he said, and still to this day we don't exactly know what it means. But that didn't mean people were discouraged from speculating, so take this with a whole truckload of salt. Genshin Impact takes heavy inspiration from the ideas of Gnosticism, the belief that human beings contain a piece of God within themselves. Asmodee, the goddess in this situation, created Teyvat and the unique universe inside of a mystical cube in which she oversees the flow of the elements, as well as enlisted the Archons as her co-actors. Also, the cubes used by her, as well as the ones seen atop Shrine of Death Keys, are referencing Metatron's cube, who uses it to watch over the flow of energy connecting Earth to the Divine. The false sky in Teyvat is home to all the constellations of vision holders, which foretell their destinies, all given by Asmodee to the Archons, which then distribute them to potential vision bearers. This excludes the Traveler's constellation, of course, as they don't have a vision and are not even from Teyvat. Finally, Reindottir, Albedo's master and one of the most knowledgeable minds in Teyvat, states that Teyvat is a world located in some starry void, said void containing the true stars. So somehow, Pedrolino, the jester mentioned by Scaramouche, Scaramouche himself, and to a certain extent, Reindottir and possibly Mona's unnamed master all know about the false sky, enough to poke their curiosity, and are planning, in this case Pedrolino and Scaramouche from the Fatui, to discover something in their mission, although we quite don't know what that is yet. Perhaps it's the true nature of Teyvat, who knows. Simply put, Guoba is a god, more specifically Marcosius, the god of the stove and patron god of the soil. This was revealed by Madame Ping during the 2.1 limited time event Moonlight Merryman, which also gave us this thing. After the destruction of the Gwili assembly during the Archon War, Marcosius was among the survivors who went on to establish Liyue Harbor. However, following a series of calamities, he used up his power to vitalize the land, greatly reducing his physical size and intelligence. For this entry, let's take a look at the lore description for the Tiara of Frost, part of the Prayers to Springtime artifact set. It reads, "The line of chief priests have always seen this same sight as their days draw to an end. A mountain of crowns in a secret place, beneath a withered tree, each one hiding a lifetime of secrets kept. Each retired chief priest offers up their crown of flawless white branches to this world. Every mighty and ancient city and every austere place of sacrifice must one day return to profundity in the earth." It is not known what withered tree this refers to, however it is known how this mountain of white branch crowns came to be. To receive answers about their many questions involving Celestia, Teyvat, and more, thousands of years ago the people appointed a chief priest who, wearing a crown made of emersal branches, would head to the depths of this world to attain enlightenment. Every retiring chief priest offers their emersal tiara to the earth in the underground chamber. Over time, a mountain of ripe branch crowns amassed underneath a withered tree, where it supposedly remains to this day. While I wasn't able to find anything about Sucrose having either ADHD or autism, I did find a similar proposition about Albedo, a character close to Sucrose, on Reddit from user khaendragon. Being honest, I have almost no experience with mental disorders, so to avoid possibly speaking inadequately about a subject I have little knowledge about, I will leave a link to the theory in the description, which supposedly comes from the perspective of a person with actual ADHD. During an unspecified amount of time, predating Morax's birth over 6,000 years ago, there were 3 moons who were sisters named Arias, Sonnet, and Canon. These 3 sisters dwelled in the lunar palace, changing places 3 times a month to ride around the heavens in a silver carriage. Failure to switch places would result in disaster. This disaster eventually struck, leading to a calamity that caused disaster to a race, which I'll speak about later, but most importantly, it separated and led to the deaths of the 3 sisters, leaving only the carcass of one, which is now the solitary moon. If this is a theory, I don't think it can be regarded as solid. Let me explain why. The original 7 Archons were established after Morax took up the last seat and ended the Archon War, and often gathered in Leoi for drinks together, but some, 5 of them to be exact, ended up passing away or disappearing or something like that, leaving open spaces for new Archons, some of which no longer adhere to the duty of guiding humanity. However, and this is where I think this theory breaks, the only 2 original Archons currently alive, Morax and Barbados, don't refer to the current Archons the same way they refer to the original Archons, which they would if they were reincarnations. Morax, for example, is Baal Senior, but never mentions her in a way that would indicate her being one of the original 7 reincarnated. If she was, Morax would long ago have recognized the power of the original Electro Archon within Baal, which is not the case. Balkan being an old Archon, sure, Morax even refers to her as old friend, and she's possibly the 3rd oldest current Archon, but she's not a reincarnation of the original Electro Archon. This entry refers to a theory posted to Reddit by a now deleted user. It states that, based on the Nosikoros, Dainslife and Asmodee are siblings, Asmodee being the first heir of the kingdom in heaven and Dainslife being the second. According to the video for the Nosikoros, which plays whenever the battle pass is reset, the first heir of the kingdom in the sky, which is most likely Celestia, went to the kingdom of darkness in order to look for an item called the Genesis Pearl. However, she was deceived and memories of her noble past faded. That person now believes she is the queen of the kingdom of darkness. A common misconception is that both of the heirs are Lumine and Aether. That would be incorrect, since Lumine and Aether are not from Celestia or any sort of kingdom in the skies of Teyvat, but rather from different worlds, and came to Teyvat 500 years ago. Also, Lumine, who is canonically the one who becomes the Princess of the Abyss in the story, shows that she still has her memories intact, while the original her lost her memories. This indicates that the Abyss is not the Kingdom of Darkness and does not possess the Genesis Pearl. Finally, Lumine chose to become the Princess of the Abyss willingly, not because she thought she was, but because it's pertinent to her and Aether's journey throughout Genshin Impact. Back to Dainslife and Asmodee, it is believed that Asmodee became infatuated with the power from the Kingdom of Darkness, causing her to lose any recollection of her noble past. Dainslife, who is the second heir as mentioned in the theory, has already taken her place back in the Kingdom in the Sky. That's where the video ends, although according to the theory, Dainslife has made an attempt to rescue her, but ended up losing the battle and part of his memories in the process. In the Teyvat chapter storyline preview, Dainslife says this:
Step forth if you have understood the meaning of your journey. Defeat me, command me to step aside. Show me that you are worthier than I to rescue her.
Dainslife is asking us to defeat him, probably because he knows he will eventually end up like his sister Asmodee. By defeating him in battle, which probably teases at a future boss fight against Dainslife, we, the Traveler, will prove our worth and make him, Dainslife, believe that we're worthy of an attempt to save the very being who trapped us and our sibling in Teyvat for some reason. If Paimon is indeed Asmodee, or part of her, this would make even more sense, as it would explain why she's been with us throughout our entire journey. He's not asking us to rescue Lumine, as she doesn't really need to be rescued. At least from what we know, it is apparent that she's in control of her own situation, and everything will be explained to us in due time. She has her memories and power, as seen in the Will We Be Reunited video, and the reunion between the siblings in Chapter 1, Act 4. This is a really interesting take, as it tries to answer the question as to who the heirs of the Kingdom in Heaven are, if we know they are not the siblings. The giant robots currently roaming Teyvat, which we call Ruin Guards, are ancient war machines, remnants from the lost nation of khaenri'ah, as described by Dainslife. They were developed not as war machines, but as protectors of the ruins. Eventually, after khaenri'ah fell, the Ruin Guards, codenamed Field Tillers, were left without masters and wandered into every corner of Teyvat, using their armament to protect not the ruins from khaenri'ah, but from other regions, maybe as instinct. This used to be a theory, but it was confirmed by Albedo in 2.3. Canonically, all beings classified as gods, including the Archons, cannot die in a way. They don't age naturally, thus maintaining the same appearance for as long as their physical form remains, and according to the game's lore, whenever an Archon is quote-unquote killed, they don't lose their life per se. Rather, their physical form is shattered, and the power inside will flow out of them and into the surrounding area, as was the case with hahAA. If they voluntarily pass on, however, they are able to control the flow of power and use it to the benefit of the land. I don't know what this entry refers to. Some of the Archon's ages are pretty widely known, and there doesn't seem to be any evidence proving the contrary. In fact, I'd say the contrary is a more plausible entry. The Archons are not as young as they seem. Salvindanir was the name of the ancient mountain kingdom erected at the peak of Dragonspine, that's now in ruins. The mountain of Dragonspine was originally called Vindanir, before Durin crashed into it much later on, during a battle against the Valiant Barbados as previously mentioned. It is suspected that, due to the drastic increase of hilichurls active throughout the entirety of Teyvat after the events of the Cataclysm, some, if not all of them, might be related directly to khaenri'ah. Perhaps they are denizens who were transformed into hilichurls as punishment for the Cataclysm, which would explain how they're not aggressive towards other creatures of the Abyss, and also have a disdain for those living in peace in Teyvat, much like other Abyss creatures. My theory is that this entry could be referring to a place called the Dark Sea, which are the locations beyond the continent of Teyvat and not under the dominion of the Seven, such as khaenri'ah. The Dark Sea is described as a wasteland beyond the dominion of deities, inhabited only by the grotesque, ghostly remains of fallen gods, and it is also home to what were once the palaces of the Seelie race. Even though it is called a sea, it is also known to encompass landmasses. Many of the gods defeated during the Archon War chose not to live under the protection of the Seven, and unknowingly fled to the lands outside of Teyvat's boundaries. This happened before the events of the Cataclysm, which happened only 500 years ago, and probably turned the Dark Sea into what we know currently. The Dark Sea could be viewed as a world beyond Teyvat, even if it's not exactly a different world, due to its fundamental differences of being a godless land ravaged by war and calamity for centuries, much unlike the world we live in the game. This entry refers to a popular theory posted to Reddit in November 2020 by user Pokemon Instinct, which ties into the previous sky is a lie theory. Since the stars in the Teyvat sky are false, the true sky is actually hidden in the lowest levels of the abyss. This idea is supported by the fact that despite supposedly going deep into the spiral abyss, we can see the stars and the moon in floors 9 to 12 specifically, suggesting that you're going up. Additionally, what do we see in these preview images for the spiral abyss's floors? Stairs, not going down, but up, which we can also see in the actual playable area. Also, when speaking to Catherine, the motto for the Adventurers Guild is, which means to the stars and the abyss, supposedly suggesting that both are connected in a way, although it could be also interpreted as the stars and the abyss being two separate things distant from one another. Also, Teyvat's description in the official website states, however, 500 years ago, the collapse of an ancient civilization turned the universe upside down, referencing the cataclysm. However, this could just be a play on words to determine the size of the calamity. Finally, given that the abyss is the actual sky, this would make Celestia Teyvat's core, or in a certain way, it would mean that Ascension to Celestia is actually delving further down into a version of hell? What? Well, this theory from what I've seen is pretty solid, and it poses a question as to why we're going up in this spiral abyss when we're supposed to be going down. The history behind the Seelie, the small floating life forms that guide travelers towards the Seelie Courts in exchange for treasure, is quite the interesting one. According to legend, the Seelies we currently know as the will-o'-the-wisp kind of things were once a race with beautiful human forms and great wisdom. They are currently the remnants of a bygone race that once served as guides for mankind. They also had palaces outside the realm the gods currently hold authority over, referencing the Dark Sea. The fall of the Seelie race occurred in ancient times, a direct result of the same incident that caused the Three Moons to tragically die. Before the event, one of the Seelie's ancestors fell in love with a certain traveler from afar and led the Seelie civilization to have an abrupt end. 30 days after they pledged their union in the Lunar Palace, the disaster that was the failed changing of the moons befell the world, and the two attempted to flee from the catastrophe. The calamity caught up to them, however, and they were punished with eternal separation and a curse that robbed them of their memories. Following the calamity, the heartbroken Seelies withered away in their grief, turning into the small spirit-like forms that they are seen as today. Cursed to forget their past, they pursue the memories they have left by guiding travelers to their old dwelling palaces, the Seelie Courts. However, somehow not all Seelies withered away into their tiny spirit-like forms. A few managed to retain their human forms. After the fall of the Seelies, a certain Wolf King would meet one of the remnants who had not yet withered away, and befriended her. It is possible she is the ancient god from whom Andreas gained his godlike power. Let me first explain what, or rather who, the Demiurge is. In philosophy, the Demiurge, a term adopted by the Gnostics, is an artisan-like figure responsible for creating, fashioning, and maintaining the physical universe. This being is considered to be the controller of the material world and antagonistic to all that is purely spiritual, and is beneath the monad, the true god. Now, the term Archon, as used in Gnosticism, determines any servant to the Demiurge. It's a Greek word that refers to a person who claims the right to rule, or to exercise power or sovereign authority over other human beings. Each Archon presides over one of the 7 planets. You can maybe see where I'm getting at. Now look at Asmodee, the unknown goddess. She possesses the title of the Sustainer of Heavenly Principles, which perfectly fits the description of the Demiurge in Gnosticism. She controls the natural order of the world. If the Archons in Genshin Impact are similar in nature to the Archons as explained by the principles of Gnosticism, and Asmodee is the Sustainer of Heavenly Principles, then she is indeed the Demiurge responsible for maintaining order in Teyvat and the lands beyond. Her being the reason as to why the cataclysm happened indicates that she feared the rise of mankind against the gods. We know that she is spiteful towards mere mortals, stating, "In the rebellion of humanity, which would understandably not be under her purview of natural order, led her to destroying an entire nation. the one which built itself without an Archon. As the sustainer of this world, she gets to decide the natural order of things. The Monad is someone we will probably see in the future, maybe indicating that the final boss in Genshin Impact is not Asmodee, but the unknown being above her. I was able to find a single theory about this entry, created by a Chinese player and Reddit user, NegativeBase3640. In it, they state that visions, referred by them as eyes of God, are external magic organs that have a meaning far more complex than just being able to control and make use of the elements. The eyes of God are only given to people who break their limits, enough to be recognized by the gods and therefore granted a vision. The theory, however, states that these visions are given with the purpose of screening away the elites of humanity, the most intellectual, courageous, powerful, and overall important people. In Chinese, according to the theory, people who have the eyes of God are called
Yuan Shen,
which means a candidate for God. People who earn visions through their trials and tribulations are no longer ordinary humans, as they are forcefully separated while the gods divide the human race in two. And therefore, by taking away humanity's intellectuals for their own use, the gods have been stifling Teva's technological progress in favor of their own personal beliefs, which are unknown to us. However, I don't see this as being the case. Vision bearers are free to do as they wish in Teyvat. Most of them, after earning their visions, continue on with their routinely tasks. Some of them use their visions for their jobs, and some don't even care that much for the gifts bestowed upon them by the gods. When someone earns a vision, either intentionally or not, their minds are not shifted. They don't become forcefully separated from the rest of society, as they are still allowed to live amongst everyone else, contributing to the continuation of humanity, in most cases more proficiently than before. However, the next entry in the list might have an explanation as to why Celestia would limit Tevat's technological progress. Originally, I was going to bundle the two entries together, but I found that explaining the theory, even if I don't personally agree with it, would be much more important. The nature of the world created and overseen by Celestia has an established cycle. Humanity, as we know it, would experience years upon years of blessings and prosperity, only for it all to come to a sudden halt before the earth was renewed, allowing the cycle to continue. However, normal humans were never given answers as to how long their prosperity would last, as they weren't supposed to know about the heavenly cycles, and thus the envoys from Celestia have remained silent about their inner workings for thousands of years. This sudden halt, probably brought upon the lands of Teyvat by the residents of Celestia themselves, might be the limitation of technology that the previous entry was referring to. The following is an excerpt from the book Moonlit Bamboo Forest Volume 3. The wolf packs are children of the moons. They remember the calamities and the tragedies that ensued. Hence, they lament the fate of their mother with each new moon. It is also why those who live among the wolves call the morning stars the surviving love of the moon, the grievous stars. This means the wolves in Teyvat have a connection to the moon sisters and mourn their fate. We know that Andreas, the spirit known as the King of the North, gained his powers from an ancient god and became a god himself. Knowing that the wolves mourned the deaths of the moon, this could imply that either Andreas or the godlike figure that gave him his power were present in Teyvat thousands of years ago during the events that set in motion the conflicts between the Moon Sisters. Remember, only humanity appeared after the death of the Moon Sisters, but not the gods. Or this could just be literature which my little brain doesn't understand. We know that the travelers themselves are from other worlds. This by itself could explain this entry, as the travelers have a huge importance in the story of Genshin Impact as played from our perspective, but I do believe it goes further than that. What I mean is that there's a possibility that people from other worlds, not including the siblings, have come to Teyvat and changed the course of history drastically, all before we arrived in Teyvat ourselves. Albedo, while not from another world himself, knows that they exist, while other characters are both aware that different worlds exist and that certain things from those worlds can come to Teyvat, be it purposefully or not. One example, as previously discussed, could be Alice and her idol magazine, which could also mean that Klee is from a different world. While discussing with Evil and Violet about this entry, they mentioned that Genshin Impact has a fair bit of anachronism. Considering how many technologically advanced civilizations have risen and fallen before the travelers arrived in Teyvat, it wouldn't be a stretch to determine that the others may have come from other worlds to this land and altered the course of history into what we know today. Understandably, the hardest entry to explain would be the lowest one in the Iceberg, so let's try to come up with a plausible theory. These two sentences originate from Denslave in the Teyvat chapter storyline preview video, which is going to be my basis for this whole theory.
That throne in the sky is not reserved for you. But mortal arrogation never stops.
While it's the siblings that appear when Denslave says this, these words are not directed at them, nor are they directed towards the player. Notice how in the video subtitles, the first sentence is in quotation marks, indicating that he is not saying this to someone directly, but instead describing something. The previous sentence in this video ties into this.
Yet buried in the depths of this world lies smoldering remains, a warning to those that dare trespass.
As we've established before, khaenri'ah, the nation decimated by Celestia, is an underground location. In this case, khaenri'ah is the warning to those who dare trespass. A powerful nation that built itself without the help of the gods, the pride of mankind where the creation of life itself was discovered and ultimately turned against itself, leading to the nation being destroyed by the gods. Those who dare trespass, in this case, their own limits of humanity, as the citizens of khaenri'ah attempted by creating life, are bound for divine punishment because the thrones in the sky are not meant for regular humans. They're meant for divine beings such as the Demiurge herself. Yet, humanity has continuously tried to understand the complexity and true reality of Teyvat, Celestia, and the universe. As stated, mortal arrogation never stops. Arrogation in this case meaning the act of taking something for oneself, to claim or seize without justification. The never-ending arrogation of humankind, in this case, is to try and overtake Celestia, or at least knowledge pertaining to Celestia for themselves. It's understandable that humanity wants to understand the universe they live in, because as Denslave states,
the gods goad us on with the promise of their 7 treasures, rewards for the worthy, the doorway to divinity.
However, those who see through the promises of the Archons and seek to uncover the truth are promptly shut down for disrupting the natural order of events. As stated before, humans were never supposed to know about the cycle of Celestia, so understandably they shouldn't be allowed by the Demiurge to comprehend the true nature of her universe. Denslave's description for chapter 4, Masquerade of the Guilty, states,
the god of justice lives for the spectacle of the courtroom, seeking to judge all other gods. But even she knows not to make an enemy of the divine.
And for chapter 6, Every Winter Without Mercy, he states,
her followers hope only to be on her side when the day of her rebellion against the divine comes at last.
The Archons are aware of the power that the Demiurge above them possesses, and as her subsidiaries, play along to her intentions. But one of them, specifically the Tsaritsa and her followers, seek to rebel against her ruler or rulers, which is why she's using the Fatui to collect all of the Archon's gnosis. Again, mortal arrogation never stops. This chapter being close to the epilogue says to me that following the rebellion of Snezhnaya against the Demiurge, we will witness something similar to what happened when khaenri'ah was destroyed by the gods. The wrath of the divine brought upon a nation due to a defiance of the natural laws of humanity. Later on, Denslave states,
some say a few are chosen and the rest are dregs. But I say we humans have our humanity. We will defy this world with a power from beyond.
The chosen few are the people from khaenri'ah not affected by the effects of the cataclysm, such as Denslave himself, while the dregs are the monsters created by said event, Durin, abyss mages, and the like. The defiance of this world with a power from beyond is indicative of Denslave's desire to rebel against the same beings who destroyed his nation, using a power created in khaenri'ah and unfamiliar to the Seven. He is openly and understandably against the ideals of the deities who side with the Seven and who took participation in the decimation of khaenri'ah 500 years ago. Even though his memory has all but faded, he is able to vividly recall the events of the fall of khaenri'ah. So, it is my belief that the story of Genshin Impact will sometime, likely during this Naya or khaenri'ah chapters, feature some sort of revolution from humanity against the ideals of the Demiurge, featuring Dainsleif and possibly Kaya, who is currently the only known remaining survivor from khaenri'ah and possibly a royal member, which leads me to believe he could have the same powers as Dainsleif, just chooses not to use them in order to hide his identity. What will happen during and after this rebellion is left up for interpretation. It would depend on what chapter this takes place, and in my eyes the power of the Divine cannot be easily measured in relation to the Archons or to Dainsleif just yet. We will have to wait and see. So there you have it, my take on the Genshin Impact Iceberg. I'd like to thank again Evil and Valid for their help with some of the entries and for creating the Iceberg, which I took as base for this video. It wouldn't be possible to create this without their help. I did a frankly ungodly amount of research for this video, and I would gladly do it again. A lot of what I said might be incorrect, so a part 2 might be needed sometime soon. Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss my next uploads, and leave a comment discussing the video. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about my entries, and what theories we can come up with together. Thanks for watching everyone, and take care.